surprise, everybody. A little extra episode this week. We are talking about Train to Busan tonight.
Yeah.
Rainwater, there was too much of a time crunch to get through Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. So we'll save that for next year. And if it's anything like the mini discussion we had about Bride of Frankenstein this morning on Twitter, it ought to be an interesting show. But tonight we're going to be talking about something that I think we're going to be agreeing on. I don't know. I have no idea how his reaction was. I expected a text or a tweet or something about it.
Oh no, I
because
kept
of the
it
movie.
very secret. I was just gonna keep it for this.
Oh, okay.
Keep you on the edge of your seat.
That's awesome, and that's great. So, if you have not seen Train to Busan, because it's got subtitles, it's a foreign movie, blah, you are fucking yourself over. I want to point that out. Easily for me, top 3 horror films of all time. All time. Period. No discussion. Like, you could argue the horror aspect of it wasn't scary. I can't fight you too much on that. In terms of being a great movie, top shelf. No debate. None whatsoever. I'm curious to know your thoughts, Mr. Rainwater.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that I was thinking about. Is like after watching, it was like it's a good movie. I don't know if I'd say it's a good horror movie necessarily. Not that the horror elements are bad at all, but it actually like I feel like it functions more like a disaster movie than a horror movie.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's just a fictional disaster, right? Like it's a zombie apocalypse instead of like, an earthquake or whatever. And I say that because just because of the way that the movie is paced. And like really, I mean, like a really well-paced movie. It's just not paced like a horror movie necessarily. There's like
very little slowness in it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like build up to the zombie stuff, but the way it's done is really different from a typical zombie movie, I feel like. And also, like, what it focuses on is a little bit different, too, because it spends a lot of time, much like a disaster movie, focusing on a lot of different characters and then kind of going back and forth between them. And
yeah, there's a lot of points of view that get brought up. And I think that's one of the things that I love about it is how it fills out the world collapsing and crumbling. You know what I mean? Like, it's like not just about...
So many characters get to have a little arc or a little thread that the movie follows, and there's always sort of for each arc there's like it's like a cause and effect theme where it's like one person's selfishness affects everybody else, and like I mean the main character arc, which is the dad, right? Like his is like a redemption arc of going from kind of this self-centered viewpoint to ultimately like I'll just say spoilers. I don't think
absolutely spoilers. If you haven't seen Train to Busan, it's on like almost every app for free. I think it's on Tubi, I think it's on Pluto, it might even be on YouTube. Go check it out,
that's right.
And then come back and watch it.
You can watch it for free on YouTube right now. Till like ultimately, giving up his life for his daughter. And it's a good arc. It's really well done. I like it's interesting because I like the way that they develop his character, and it's in a very like subtle way because he's not like a particularly emotive person. So you kind of spend a lot of the movie sort of trying to figure out what the hell he is thinking, because he doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeve too much. He doesn't not very good at connecting with his daughter at all.
That's true. That's a very fair point. I hadn't considered that, but you're absolutely right. He
struggles with it throughout the entire movie, and that's kind of I think that's like kind of one of the big points in his arc is like he never figures out how to properly emotionally bond with his daughter, but he's able to sort of, at least for himself, feel like he's actually done something for her. You know? Because ultimately, like, she's just left in tears, right?
Yeah.
As he's like, jumping from the train, and because he's making the only possible good decision he can in that situation, because he knows he's going to become a zombie in a matter of moments. But I thought that was really interesting for him because I think in an American movie, that kind of arc would have been like, oh, I suddenly become able to emotionally connect with my daughter. We're laughing and having a good time and all this other stuff. And I think there's more of a realism to his character where it's like, no, his character doesn't like 180 flip. It's like he just has an intellectual understanding of the circumstance.
Right.
And comes to terms with that. And I thought that was like I thought that was really unique, and for that kind of storyline. And also just done in a way that I thought was, it was really, I don't know, like, it's emotionally affecting because, like, I was in tears by the end of the movie.
That was going to be one of my questions that I was going to ask you. Did you or did you not cry? Because I mean, we both, have experiences in fatherhood. So, and you don't even have to be a parent to, deal with, to be affected by the movie, but it hits a little harder. Like, I don't know if when I saw it, if I was a dad yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think I was on my way to being. I don't remember if I was yet. But it hits differently when you've had parenting experiences. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a whole different mind. Like, your mind reacts in ways that, like, after you parent, whether it's a dog or a kid or a goldfish, I don't care. There's like, it's like an achievement unlocked in your brain, and your brain sees the world and takes in things differently. And I know when I was watching it earlier today to refresh for this podcast, I was weeping. Like, my son was just sitting there in my lap looking at me. Like, I don't think he's ever seen me cry before, which, he's going on 2 years old. So I had a 2-year streak of not crying, and I blew it with this movie. But he was looking at me, and my son actually was like, I don't think he was wiping my tears. I think he was trying to see what was happening to my face.
What the fuck's going on with your face, Dad?
But no, it's like, it really is an impactful ending. And the one thing, and it's interesting, you talk about the restrained emotions of the lead actor. There's a contrast between him and also other characters. Some characters are middle of the road emotional reactors. Some of them are bombastically reacting constantly. But they all feel real. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the things about it is like this. It feels so authentic. Like, yeah, there's zombies running around and they're contorting and weird things and they're, biting people and chasing and all that kind of stuff. But the human performances feel so real that you get invested in everything that happens, whether it's they're moving from train car to train car, or they're trying to rescue somebody, or they're trying to sneak into the I think it's like an airport or something like that, like the transfer port. Yeah. Like, all these kinds of things, you are invested in these characters, and they, for most of us here in America, they don't speak our language. We don't speak their language, I should say. Like, you have to take the time, because I don't believe a dub exists. You have to take the time to be reading the subtitles as opposed to visually taking in every image, right?
Yeah.
So for all of that to work is a masterful feat. You know what I mean? Like, it's an insane accomplishment for me. Now, I did a little research. The director of this movie actually has a history as a Korean animation director. Like, his thing was Korean animation movies. For those of you who don't know, because we're all Americans, there are a lot of animation movies that are drama. Not like the fuck is it? Anime, where it's like action, fighty, superhero type stuff. Yeah. There are drama movies that are animated, and that's the kind of realm that he came from. So I'm very surprised that for a live action film, he was able to jump from that medium to this medium and be so fucking great. You know what I mean? Like, it really is a feat. I see you're looking it up. What are you looking up? Any of the movies?
Well, I'm just looking at what other movies this person has worked on. I mean, I haven't heard of any of them, but I also, like, Train to Busan is one that I've heard about a lot because I've heard a lot of people talk about it.
Sure.
but I never watched it until you mentioned it. And I think it's interesting because I think both with Korean filmmakers and Japanese filmmakers, I've noticed this where culturally they tend to not pigeonhole so much, at least with directors, because I've seen a number of animation directors in Japan also do live action, like Hideaki Anno, who is most famously known for having done or directed Neon Genesis Evangelion, did the most recent did Shin Godzilla, which is like a live it's a live action movie obviously, but like he reinterpreted Godzilla in sort of his own unique take, and it's a really different movie in the sense that it's kind of a I know we're talking about Train to Busan, but I just kind of want to cover Shin Godzilla for like 1 second if we get a chance.
Yeah, it's fine.
It covers what would actually happen in sort of this weird realistic viewpoint of like how the country of Japan would deal with a Godzilla attack, in the sense that it follows like the administration, like the government and governmental administration, and how they would figure everything out and work through all the bureaucratic loopholes. Because what's really interesting, ironic in the movie, or I don't know if ironic is the right word, but what's interesting in the movie is this idea of like, because bureaucracies are what they are, you have to like talk to this guy to make sure that it's okay, that you get permission to get, like fuck the fact that it's an emergency. Like you still have to talk to the environmental agency about how, this new experimental weapon is going to impact farmland in the country of Japan. So it's like, it works out really well thematically as a disaster movie. Like that's another movie that's a movie that's very strictly a disaster movie. And it's done in a way that is so realistic, quotes realistic in the way it engages with thinking about it, that it's just like it's almost like a documentary in a sense. Wow. But not really. Like there's certainly a lot of drama and stuff, but like it was just like a different and unique way to do a Godzilla story. So anyway, going back to Train to Busan, that's cool to know, and so I'm gonna have to check out his animation stuff, because I'm always interested to see directors who kind of go between different media. I certainly could, and I can certainly feel some of the animation influence in the movie, in the sense of the way they think about not just animating, but staging like the zombie sort of attacks. Like. There's a really cool way that the way like bodies just like pour out of the trains or through windows and stuff, in contrast to like World War Z, that other zombie movie that I feel like kind of lifted some ideas from this movie to some extent.
When did World War Z come out? Because I believe
it's wrong, because it could have been before, but
I feel like World War Z came out in like the early 2010s, and this came out in 2016.
World War Z. Okay, World War Z was 2013. So
yeah. So
anyway, I think Train to Busan did it better.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so anyway, going with that information, it seemed like the director liked that idea and like had a different reinterpretation of that concept.
Well,
go ahead.
I was, not to cut you off, but I was watching. So the way I researched this was I watched the last drive-in version of it with Joe Bob Briggs. And he was kind of throwing out some information about it. And I believe the director, he wasn't necessarily negatively critiquing American filmmaking or American zombie movies, but I guess he talked about how there's a difference in how things are seen in the eastern part of the world versus how they're seen in the West. Yeah. And one of the observations that he made was that the West was very obsessed with the makeup style of zombies, and that wasn't something that he wanted to focus on so much. So what he wanted to focus on in terms of his zombies was movement. Yeah. So there was I want to say it's a pole dancer, like someone who had opened like a pole dancing school, who had been like an acrobatic dancer or something of the sort, but they had like rehearsals for 3 or 4 months with all of the zombie extras to get them to be contorting in the way that they move so uniquely to impress a style that way. So it was less about the makeup and more about the movement. So that really kind of speaks
effective
to what you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it was extremely effective in giving those zombies like a personality or like a trait that was different from other zombie movies. Because like the closest I could make comparison to might have been like sort of 28 Days Later, but like even then they do have this very specific way of movement, and the way that the movie actually like goes into a little depth as to like how they function, like the idea that the way the zombies track motion, almost kind of like the way the T-Rex tracks motion in Jurassic Park, but like they go deeper into it and sort of like, okay, they actually are very sensitive, or not sensitive, but like their eyesight's not great, so if it's dark they can't track very well.
Right.
And that was like a cool sort of unique take on that, in a way where you see it develop as the movie goes on, right? And you see them use that knowledge to like solve problems, like getting further into the train, which was really like, I wasn't expecting it to go that way, and it was a really great way of developing that plot, and sort of. And I think that's what's also kind of interesting is like they spend so much time developing all that. Is honestly like the least important part of the story ultimately. Like there's so much time spent developing the zombies, but they really are conduits
to other things happening. Yeah,
and there really are conduits to an overall more important theme, which is about sort of how do you balance sort of the needs of an individual and the needs of a society, right?
Sure.
In a given emergency, because that's something that's really reiterated throughout each of the character arcs of each of the main characters that we like focus on in the story.
But let's be fair for a second here. You watch this, like I said, it was made in 2016, and you can easily see COVID parallels.
Yeah.
If you're watching it now. But here's the thing. Doesn't every zombie movie have that?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Sure. Like, it's kind of like par for the course when it comes to a zombie movie. But for some reason, and I hate the term elevated horror, but in this movie, it is elevated to a way that it's just gut-punching while you're watching it, more than it would be for me on, like, The Walking Dead or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know why. Like, I'm trying to figure out why it resonates more.
Something about the way I like the movie deals with the themes is that it never talks down to the audience. It never says outright to the audience what the theme is. You pick it up from just each character's story and how each character is sort of reacting to each character's actions, right? Like you see the dad kind of grow up as a person interacting with I'll just call him the tough guy, who kind of like just calls him asshole and like slowly befriends him right over the movie as they go through fighting zombies together. And that in itself is like, it's not like the tough guy ever comes to a point where he like is like, oh, you know what, you're all right. He's still kind of like, well, you're still an asshole, but like there's a great, I don't know, there's just like I don't know if it's necessarily realism, but the way that it's written is just like characters seem true to themselves and nothing ever feels forced. And I really appreciate that about the film. Like even the character who I kind of think of as the bad guy, who's that businessman. Yep. He even like at the very end on the confrontation on the train between him and the dad, like he has a kind of a weird sympathetic moment where he's like, I just want to be back to my mother, you know, because he's scared. Like that's ultimately kind of the movie kind of unravels like his psychology, which is like he's doing all this shit because he's terrified and he's acting out of fear. It never really moralizes him. It's just like very objectively is like, okay, this is why this guy is like this. This is why, and he's caused all this pain because of it. But at the same time, you see why, and you kind of oddly sympathize with him to a certain extent, because you actually see the reasons for his actions, even though those actions have terrible consequences, right?
Well, I mean, that's what it is, right? Like, that's if you really pay attention to the movie, that's, I mean, almost everything that's going on has a parental child relationship at its core. Like, you have the tough guy, and he's defending his wife who's pregnant with his kid. You have the father and the daughter. You have the evil businessman guy who's trying to get back to his mother. You have there was one more. Now I can't remember what it was. Wasn't that the sisters? Or were they sisters?
Yeah, they were sisters.
So you kind of had like an older sister, little sister kind of like thing, like protecting, another family member. You had the phone call with the dad calling his mom, and she turns into a zombie over the phone. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, all of the scenes, like, they have the necessary zombie. We have to get through the plot, so we have to rescue them because we split them up and blah, 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 blah. But they're all twisted into opportunities to reflect on family relationships and exposing the main character to all of the choices that he has. He can act like the evil businessman. He can act like the tough guy. He can act like, like his mom when she goes. Like, he's aware of all these things. All of these different situations are presenting him with options. And it's really about, offering those choices. So I think that's what's beautiful about it is, like, that's what you really want when you're crafting a story is you want characters to make choices, decisions. Yeah. And you don't want those decisions to be easy. You want them to be hard. You want them to be difficult because that's what's going to grip us. You know what I mean? Like, when we're facing life every day, we all don't see what's right in front of us as the obvious thing. We all have reasons to understand and justify both options or whatever multiple options are in front of us. So I think that's really what I took away from it from a storytelling standpoint was I look at this and I'm like, wow, that's really kind of genius how they used the supporting characters, but like you said, it didn't beat you over the head with the theme. Like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously the guy has a pregnant wife. Obviously, his mom is his mom and all that kind of stuff. And he's the dad to his daughter. And the reveal of the evil businessman didn't come towards the end, as you pointed out. And that's kind of like the last straw that was needed was this is what you pretty much have been so far to your daughter. Not in the same circumstances of a zombie apocalypse, but just in a, you know what I mean? Like, you're treating her like how this man treats the rest of the world. Right. So it's kind of like that's the rude awakening he needed for that last moment when he was defending his daughter. And that's really what kind of puts a pin in the final movement of his arc, I guess you could say. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling. Does that make sense?
No, what you're saying makes a ton of sense. I hadn't really thought of it that way necessarily. I hadn't made that connection, but it is a good connection to make because there is a parallel between him and the businessman where it's like, yeah, this could be you in like 30 years, like you have that potential if you're not careful, because I mean, the movie spends a fair amount of time kind of looking at the dad as like, as unfavorable, right? Because he does have he's divorced. He has a bad relationship with his daughter. His mother is really concerned about how he's treating, his daughter, how he's treating himself.
But they do. I wanted to point this out. And this was, I think, another brilliant thing that they did. We talk on here about the Save the Cat method a lot because I'm a big fan of Blake Snyder's book, Save the Cat. And for those of you who aren't aware, there is a screenwriting, storytelling notion that within the first few scenes of a movie, you need to have your main character do something to make the audience like them, right? Mm-hmm. Like saving a cat. Or something stupid like that. You can be a complete anti-hero, do bad things, like just be an asshole, whatever it may be, Tony Stark, smart ass, whatever. But they got to do something that makes the audience kind of get on their side. What would you say you're a smart guy, so I'm pretty sure you're going to figure this out. What would you say was his save the cat moment?
I mean, really, the closest thing I can think of is like the conversation he has with his daughter about having watched her seeing like her at the recital.
Ah.
And that was his first attempt to like really try and connect with her, because up to that point you really just see him kind of fucking fail as a dad.
Yeah, that's true.
And like
he bought her 3 Wiis.
And then also like as a his job is basically just manipulating the economy, so like he's not exactly somebody that you look up to, And for you, was it something different?
Yeah. It's odd that you bring up the whole he manipulates the economy thing, because in one of the opening scenes, he's on the phone with his boss, and his boss is telling him to sell the stock. To me, the save the cat moment is when he tries to persuade his boss to go another way, when he's like, "Sir, if we sell the stock now, it's going to affect so many people," and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Now, it's not like a grand sweeping gesture as dramatic as the one that you pointed out with the daughter, but it's that inkling of, hey, he's a good person, but he's in a circumstance that he's got to do what his boss tells him to do.
Sure.
And the brilliance of it, here's the real brilliance of it, in my opinion. It's not that he didn't succeed. It's that moments later, one of the underlings under him comes into his office, and he does the big
tells
boss
him exactly
man.
what the boss said to do.
Right, exactly. So it very much lays out that whole choice of he's a man straddling 2 worlds, of being a good person and being a good business person and this and that. So to me, that was the brilliance of it, was that very subtle moment goes, oh, okay, he's sticking up for the little guy, the people that would be affected by this. Okay, he's got to do that. And then he turns around and then he's a complete douchebag. So now we have set up this character as being both good and bad, or potentially good and bad. And because it's so early in the story, the movie, I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, now they're casting doubt in my mind. I don't know what choices he might make. He's, you know what I mean? Like, he's got the good heart, but he was able to sell, and I think this is important for the acting standpoint, the scene where he tells the underling, we're going to sell, blah, 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 the lemmings, da, 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 da. That was done so well that I was convinced that, okay, he's subscribing to this notion. He's all in on this notion. He's easily persuadable. So it's not like, oh, I know his heart of gold is going to overcome it. Like, I don't know that. And that's the beauty of that scene, both from writing, directing, acting, all of the above.
Yeah.
And I think that was the moment that really kind of gets you going in the movie, where it's like, okay, I want to see where this goes. Like, if you, theoretically, like how you pointed out, it's a disaster movie. You could take the zombies out.
Yep.
You could put in a volcano. It could be asteroids. Volcano. It could be whatever the fuck you want it to be. And the movie could be the same thing. And I would still give a shit about what happens at the end.
Yeah. I mean, there's not even really a coherent explanation for why there's a zombie outbreak. There's just like some stuff about a chemical factory and something else. And
well, it's his business. It's actually the company that he works for.
I couldn't quite connect those dots, because there's a conversation that he has with somebody on the phone at the end about how that kind of tied all that stuff together, but I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's unimportant to the plot, but it's useful from a,
it's from a world building standpoint and tying everything together. Yeah, it's, I mean, that taps more into anti-capitalistic messaging that, that the director probably wanted to push out. But, and here's the thing, like, even if you disagree with that kind of mentality, I couldn't see it sullying your love for this movie.
No, it doesn't. Like, it's so in the background. You don't even have to know any of that stuff to enjoy the movie. It's not important to knowing why there are zombies, because it literally could have been anything. It could have been it could have been an alien invasion. It could have, it's, and I think that's. I would be curious to know then why there was a choice in the story to go with zombies. You know what I mean? Because I wonder. I have no idea, and there's no real way of knowing.
Right. I mean, you talk about the artist fallacy. Is that what it was called? I forget what it was dubbed. But that was something I was going to ask you, because I'll give my answer after you go. But was there any artistic things in the movie that stuck out at you? Like, we're just like, oh, that's really great symbolism, or that's really great artistry, or anything in general that jumped
I mean,
at
I
you?
honestly I really like the way that they did the zombies in the movie. I really like
Okay.
the choices that were made about like, um, especially like the way that they did sort of the eyes in the transition, because you can kind of they did a very good job of sort of showing the transition from being human to zombie in a way that was like, oh, okay, there's still little points at which they're retaining consciousness, but they're slowly losing it. Like,
Right.
there's a really good scene where the tough guy, he's transforming and he's still like fighting back, you know what I mean? Which is kind of interesting too, because I feel like that sort of further restates his character, right?
Yeah.
As
Absolutely.
like he is not just strong in his body, but he's like he has strong fortitude of will
Yeah.
to the point that he's gonna do everything he can up to the last second.
Yeah.
Which is kind of it's interesting because that's a character type that I don't necessarily feel like gets a lot of attention in movies. Like that used to be more of a '90s action thing, or like like a Lord of the Rings thing. But like it's not really something you see too often, where you have like or at least lately, I should say. It's not something you see as much lately, where you have a character who sort of exists to like, this is the character who's going to die, but he's going to have a really great moment, kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is I kind of miss that in movies.
No, that's fair. I mean, because they, with the exception of like superheroes, the tough guys are always kind of typecast as idiots, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean, or
Well, also lately in movies is to not have like a big grand going down with the ship sort of moment. It's oftentimes for a while it's been like very abrupt kind of quote unquote realistic deaths, where it's just like they get taken out sort of by happenstance or by some sudden
yeah,
whatever action, to where you leave the audience sort of shocked that they're dead, as opposed to giving them a moment to shine.
yeah, that's true. I would agree with that. It's come down more to the shock and the surprise factor than it is
Yeah. Yeah.
resolution. You know what I mean, or like heartbreak. For me, it was the very first shot of the movie. Do you remember what it was?
I really don't remember the very beginning of the movie
No, it's
very
fine.
well.
You've only seen it once.
Yeah.
And the first time you're watching a movie, you're never gonna
Oh no, the
take in
first
stuff.
scene's really good. I'm remembering it because it's like the farmer is like at the checkpoint.
Yes, he's at the
And-
checkpoint. It's the first shot that I'm talking about, though, not the first scene.
Is that I don't know then. I don't remember the first shot.
I didn't expect you to, but it's a animatronic dressed as the worker waving the guy forward.
Oh, yeah.
And then it cuts to the actual people working, and they're still in the same wardrobe, costume, uniform that the animatronic was wearing. And to me, I'm reading this knowing the movie already.
Sure.
The second time that I'm watching it, or third time, I think it was probably. And I'm watching it going, okay, they're talking about, when you put on a job, you become less human. You lose your soul. You are a robot. You are fulfilling a duty. You are doing nothing else. And then that resonates throughout the whole movie with the businessman, with the dad, with the way that the government is handling things. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff really kind of starts jumping out at me. But I thought it was just really good artistry, because that's the only time that anything like that happens in the movie, where it's like, oh, there's a robot doing a job and we're talking about work here. You know what I mean? Like they took a chance. They stated the thematic premise in every way but the dialogue, which is what I thought I loved about this.
Which is the best way to do it, in my opinion, because it's just it allows, like I said, it allows the audience to come to their own conclusions.
Right.
It doesn't talk down to the audience, which I feel like is something that in more recent filmmaking in the United States, like, has been kind of a problem. Like, it's
Sure.
really made a lot of movies kind of unbearable to a certain extent.
The word you're looking for, Mr. Rainwater, is cringe.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, do you have anything else that you want to talk about in regards to Train to Busan? I mean, we could do this as a short episode, or we could go a little longer if you got something. Because, I mean, if we had disagreements over it, we could actually fight it out.
I
but...
know. I don't know if we would have anything to really disagree on. Like, it's just it's a good movie throughout. I didn't. It's not like my favorite movie ever, but I really enjoyed it. Like,
would you say it's your favorite zombie movie?
Oh yeah, probably, because I don't really like zombie movies, and this one was really
Same.
watchable for me. So,
I mean, like, I would argue, something like Night of the Living Dead is an important movie. It's an important zombie movie, but I don't think it's the best.
The only other zombie movie that I like aside from this one is I think it's called Dawn of the Dead. It's the one where they're in the shopping mall.
Yeah, I don't know which dead it is. I've seen bits and pieces, but I've never actually watched the entire movie. I think it was done in the 70s, right? Or like early 80s?
Yep, it's in the 70s. I was actually looking it up real quick. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Dawn of the Dead. Anyway, it's the original one, not the remake. So the original one's really good, and
I've heard good things about the remake. Have you seen the remake?
I haven't seen the remake.
Believe it or not, I've heard great things, and here's the really surprising part. I've heard great things, and it was directed by Zack Snyder.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if I just heard in a vacuum where I heard like 2 or 3 people that just happened to love it, or if it's been like a bunch of people that loved it, but
yeah.
I have heard good things about the remake. Like, some people have said that was like one of Zack Snyder's best films. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I'll have to watch it, but same as you, I'm not big on the zombie genre. I tried getting into Walking Dead, but it didn't resonate for me. I had too many problems with some of the loopholes and cop-outs that they took. But for me, I guess we can go a little bit longer by talking about this. It's an extension of it, because we talked about we kind of briefly touched on this idea earlier. The zombies were irrelevant to the actual overall story. Like we talked about, you could swap them out. Yeah. And to me, as an artist, a storyteller, a filmmaker, it's not that I'm not interested in zombies. It's that whenever I watch a zombie movie, I don't feel like they're taking full grasp of the potential like this movie did. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, they used those things. Same thing with Midnight Mass. You have vampires, right? But then Midnight Mass was able to, spoiler alert, Midnight Mass was able to draw these parallels between vampirism and like Catholicism and like all this like drinking of the blood and my life is your life and an angel and all this kind of stuff. Like, no vampire thing has really ever done that before. No zombie movie has really kind of done that before. So to me, and again, I'm not talking about like elevated horror, but I'm looking at like using the full potential of the particular subgenre that's at stake. Like, what can you say with this material? Because like the only time that I remember I talked about this in college because I had one friend who was like a zombie obsessed person, and we were talking movies, and I just remember, number one of my biggest complaints about zombie movies was that they were always like a chemical engineer bio thing or whatever, like origin, and I always kind of leaned a little bit more towards the supernatural one, like the zombies that climb out of a grave. Yeah, that to me seemed to be like a little Plan 9-ish. But the more supernatural, spooky thing. But one of the things that he had written a zombie short for his senior thesis, and to me, I tried to pitch him a scene. To me, that seemed like it was the only thing that was interesting to me about this entire thing. It was a scene of a bunch of survivors in like a Jeep, like an army Jeep that's like a little durable. Mm-hmm. and they're driving down like a lone, I want to call it a southern highway, but you know what I mean? Like there's grass on most sides. It's not trees, just grass. And on the roadway, it must have been a massacre that had happened earlier, but there are hundreds of dead bodies just basically lining the entire highway. Now, whether or not he turned me down because it was probably production impossible for students,
Sure.
or he just didn't care for it, I don't know. But the idea for me, the interesting thing for me was the driver of the Jeep deciding we have to get where we're going. We're driving over these bodies, and keeping the camera in the Jeep with the survivors as the car bumps, as you hear skulls crush underneath the weight of the car, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like one of the normal regular people in the car just starts crying. Like, to me, that was the interesting thing about that subgenre, was examining, wait a minute, people died. Like, people are dead, and we have to desecrate these bodies to keep going. Like, to me, that was interesting. Like, taking a new advantage of that subgenre to say something that you can't really say with something else. So, like, that's one of the reasons why I'm not interested in zombie things, is because it's always the same old shit. And this wasn't that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, like, I was going to say, Train to Busan is not necessarily that great of a zombie movie, but it is a great movie anyway. And, like,
in spite of itself.
And I would say, like, in terms of zombie movies, I would say better, quote unquote, better zombie movies in terms of dealing with the actual zombie theme or whatever. Dawn of the Dead, the original one, I would say is really good. And then Shaun of the Dead, actually, which is a parody, but is actually like a really effective zombie movie.
I would actually put Shaun of the Dead as number 2 as like my favorite zombie movies, because I think I would agree with you on that is a great movie. You know what I was thinking as we were just having this moment? We should have probably had Joker on this episode, because I have a feeling that we would gush about Train to Busan, call it the best zombie movie of all time, and Joker would be like, how about this movie?
I don't know if he's seen that movie, but I'm pretty sure he's probably seen it, but like...
He's probably seen more zombie movies than us, though.
He likes some zombie movies, and I know that he's had a lot of interaction with the George Romero films, so he might have something more astute to say in regards to that.
We're operating in a bubble when we say it's the greatest horror movie or zombie movie of all time, where I'm sure Joker might agree with us. I'm not saying he's definitely going to disagree with us, but I'm just saying he's got more exposure in the genre, so he would probably have a better thought to introduce us to other movies that we might like. He definitely has some
stuff to recommend, I'm sure.
We'll have to put that on the back burner for next October when we do a spooky season.
But yeah, I was gonna say too, like, I'm kind of glad that zombie movies are not as popular as they were, because I was kind of sick and tired of them after like 28 Days Later is all right, you know. Like,
yeah, it's okay.
It's a fine movie. Like, it's scary in the ways that needs to be scary, and it has I think something that a lot of zombie movies do that people like is they often have sort of an apocalyptic dread that pervades them, right? Yeah. And I think it also sort of stimulates for a lot of people. They kind of go into prepper fantasies about, well, if I were in a zombie apocalypse, this is what I would do, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's why a lot of people like zombie movies, is because it does like stimulate that part of their mind where they start thinking about, like, well, if I were in that situation, I would do the smart thing, this or that or the other, you know. This is how
Didn't we have this conversation the other day for the other podcast where I was talking about how I would beat up wolves? Or was that a conversation I had with somebody else?
We were talking about anxiety in general, yeah, and you were talking about some prepper fantasies.
That's pretty much, yeah, that is me. I guess I am a prepper in my brain. There is more zombie coming, though, unfortunately, because I just remembered that there was also earlier this year, last year, there was the Zack Snyder heist movie, Army of the Dead.
Right.
I don't know if you watched that movie at all.
I haven't seen it. I've heard about it.
It was on Netflix, but apparently there's a TV series now coming out called Army of the Dead Las Vegas, And then there's also another movie called Planet of the Dead that he's directing that's coming out. So I don't think we're just about done with zombie movies yet. I think they're always going to be sticking around here and there. There just won't be a surge.
Zombie movies tend to be very popular around economic recessions too.
Interesting. I didn't thought about that, and we are definitely swimming in that pool at the moment.
There's a weird correlation there, and so I guess we should expect more zombie movies next couple of years.
God damn it. Somebody fix the economy so we can have different movies. All right. Well, unless there's any other thoughts you want to offer up, I think it might be just time to say Happy Halloween to everybody and peace out. So, everybody, we apologize that we wish we could have brought you more spooky episodes this month, but life is life, and we don't get paid for this shit. So, you get what you get. We will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Later.